Hello there, my name is Pavosh Termach and now we'll unveil the top news of recent days. Russian terrorist attacks are killing civilians again and again and again. And not just civilians, but workers of rescue services. In Odesa, a rescue worker and a paramedic died as a result of 2 missile strikes. In total, 16 people died, another 55 people, including 7 firefighters, were injured. Such a large number of injured people is explained by the fact that the Russians struck again at the same place of the city. As a result of a Russian missile attack on the city of Odesa, civilian infrastructure was damaged. A fire broke out at the point of impact. Rescuers of the State Emergency Service immediately arrived at the scene of the impact and began extinguishing the fire, sorting out the debris and searching for the injured. During the works, the enemy launched a missile attack again.
This tactic is constantly used by the enemy. In our area of responsibility, we have repeatedly recorded such cases when, during the work of the relevant operational services, the Russians strike again at the same place.
The Russian army fired missiles, probably of the Iskander-M type, from the temporarily occupied Crimea. Morning will be announced tomorrow in Odesa and the region. In total, 10 private houses, a car service station, low-pressure gas pipeline and 2 fire rescue vehicles were damaged as a result of these strikes. These are the results of Russian liberators of the city of Odesa, as they call themselves. Russian rebel forces were able to liberate 40 square kilometers of Russia from the dictatorial Putin regime. This information is shown by the deep state resource, which shows the real situation on the front line based on videos and photos from open sources. Of course, pro-Kremlin mass media are currently trying to show that everything is calm in the border regions, but it is not so. After all, the fighting has been going on for more than 3 days, and even the propagandists have to admit that the big Russian army doesn't control several settlements and say that is nothing wrong with them. Well, this is not a common tactic for the Russians. They lost almost 500,000 soldiers, no big deal. Lost the village, no big deal. The main thing is to hold a performance called elections, and to make it more fun for the people. The elections will last 3 days. After all, not everyone will have time to vote in 1 day. Well, that is not people, but counterfighters will not have time to issue everything. Although they try very hard, in half of a day they already show 20% turnout in the regions. Most of them are in the occupied territories of Ukraine. Almost everyone there has already voted under the muzzles of machine guns for themselves and all the neighbors who were killed and who left. But they didn't even worry about the neighbors, because you can write any turnout.
Would like to congratulate Vladimir Putin on his landslide victory in the elections starting today. No opposition, no freedom, no choice. Charles Michel, President of the European Council, on social network X.
And by the way, elections in Russia take place under any conditions, because, as I already said, it is all about the people on the territory. And if this is so, then can someone tell what the Russians are fighting for? Has anyone thought about it? But seriously, for what? For the sake of the patience of the dictator and his routine-made one statement. After all, this war is difficult to understand. If in the Middle Ages they fought for territory, for resources, what is Russia fighting for now? Why does a Buryat die at 7,000 kilometers from his home? However, the most interesting thing is that ordinary Russians cannot answer this question too, as they cannot answer why the war was started against Ukraine, although they support it. And now, when the Russian rebels have begun their raid on Belgorod and Kursk, ordinary Russians may wonder what it's like to live for more than 2 years under constant shelling and the danger of being wounded or killed. After all, the Russians, participants in the raids, warn of mass attacks on Russian troops in the Belgorod and Kursk regions, and therefore call for the evacuation of civilians. At the same time, Russian security forces in Belgorod surrounded the railway station to prevent evacuation, as they have repeatedly done before. They protect their lives of soldiers with civilians, and even Putin himself confirmed it, but he is a dictator and he doesn't feel sorry for anyone. Russian people trusted him and now suffer from his decisions. And now we are not talking about Ukrainians, we will observe, but whether Russia will preserve anything remains to be seen. The EU moves towards using 27 billion euros in profit from frozen Russian assets for Ukraine. Officials could put forward a proposal before the meeting of prime ministers in Brussels next week, reports The Guardian. According to the EU media, leaders are trying to take a significant step towards confiscating a potential 27 billion euros in profit generated over the next 4 years by Russian state assets frozen in Europe to help fund the war effort of Ukraine. Officials at the European Commission are poised to put forward what they believe is a legally robust proposal to be considered by member states, possibly before a meeting of prime ministers in Brussels next Thursday. About $300 billion belonging to the Russian central bank have been frozen in the West, largely in foreign currency, gold and government bonds. About 70% of these are held in the Belgian Central Securities Depository. Euroclear, which is holding the equivalent of 190 billion euros. Deposits held in Europe are likely to generate between 15 and 20 billion euros in after-tax profits between now and the end of 2027. This year, they are expected to generate between 2 and 3 billion euros in profits, depending on potential interest rate. Money that could then go straight to Ukraine. While officials are hopeful of an agreement on seizing the profits, they do not expect a deal yet on how their money should be used, because some states are against using it to help Ukraine's military, preferring that the cash be spent on reconstruction and humanitarian efforts.
We must close all loopholes in the sanctions against Russia, and there should be no sectors of the Russian economy involved in this aggression that are still free for sanctions. This particularly relates to the nuclear sector. Also, Russian assets that are already frozen should be confiscated. And we need to go further, find, freeze, and securely pacify every dollar accumulated by Putin and his friends.
Last month, EU leaders agreed that the proceeds could be held in a separate account, clearing the war for step B, which would be a decision that this money could be confiscated and sent to Ukraine. That concludes our today's video. Thank you for watching. Stay updated, comment, like and subscribe to our UETV English channel for more news from Ukraine. Your support is what really matters. Goodbye.